I'm just going to quickly, I'm not sure how we're doing with time, but I'm just going to quickly ask you if we could together taste. Do you have one of the Dominican Republic bars with you?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we taste that one, and you can take me through that whole journey? And I'll think in my head, yeah, that's what I'm experiencing, or that's. So I'm just gonna go. How many of the range of bars that you have? Because I know I don't have them all. I've got Dominican Republic. I've got Peru. And then I've got the Solomon Islands.
I'm eating chocolate already.
Yeah, great. So I'm gonna have a go. And
okay, so until recently, we had 4 dark. We had the Dominican Republic, Solomon, Peru, and we also had Ecuador. But unfortunately, that was only a limited opportunity to get hold of the Ecuador beans. So we had 4. And we will look to grow maybe to 5 or 6 by being able to bring in a couple of the Pacific Island ones to accompany this. So I think we'll keep the Dominican and the Peru because they're lovely, because they're so different and definitely different than the Pacific. But then to be able to have this, these options from the Pacific Islands would be absolutely, that would be ideal.
so take me through that, because what I can feel right now is I can really taste at first is the fermentation of the bean, and very strong sort of it. When I taste my beans as soon as they come out of the sun, and there's still some sort of violet beans. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. I can sort of taste that a little bit. It's a little bit more.
You've got me at a disadvantage because I haven't been able to taste that, but I pick it up as an astringency.
Astringent, yeah.
And that's absolutely dominant in dark chocolate that's of supermarket big factory origin. That sort of astringency is what unfortunately most people associate with dark chocolate.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. When it's only at a subtle level, like we're tasting there in that initial taste, it's just one of the parts of the journey you go through with the taste. But when it's completely dominant, so that you can't pick up the nice acids and other fruity characters, it's not an asset at all. I think in the very first crunch, I pick up quite an aromatic. I'm wondering, is there an aromatic spiciness in that first crunch before you get into that astringency? But while you're going through that astringency, you're then starting to pick up sort of your rich flavors, and it's getting hard to put your finger on exactly what they are, but possibly dark red fruits, sort of plumminess.
Plummy, yeah. I just had that on the top of my head. And definitely a lot more earthy, even though there's that aromatic sharpness at the beginning, which is actually the violet bean that I can taste.
Did you violet or violent?
Violet. Oh, violent. No, it's actually I can taste it as very similar to a bar that I made with our own beans. So it's a very similar note to the Samoan. So what I would expect a fresh batch of Samoan beans would taste like, but that very similar. So I guess you can expect something similar to that with the Samoan beans later on, but definitely doesn't have the fullness of character and smoothness of the Solomon, and I guess the rich fruitiness of the Solomon as well, because it's kind of short in the Dominican Republic one. Yeah,
it is. This particular one, tasting the caramel as much as sometimes I do, which is a very nice character in the Dominican, is when it makes it very approachable for people who are a little eating dark chocolate. So I generally say, if you want something a little softer, less acid, and more approachable, try a Dominican. This particular one I'm tasting right here, again, is it my taste buds doing me good service or not? I'm not sure, but I can't quite pick up those caramels that I'd expect. They're probably there.
Yeah, I can pick up the caramels. Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. And how would that different more? Do you have the Peruvian one there with you?
Yes, I've got a Peru.
Unfortunately, and I'm really sad about this, we can't taste the Vanuatu because I promised it to Keith, who's actually in Wellington. So I tasted. Yeah, so I have. I've
got a little more. I've got a few. I could make another, say, 3 bars.
Oh, that'd be great. I'm leaving on Tuesday, so I don't think I'll be able to get it. But if we can quickly go through the because the other 2 bars that I have is ginger nutty, which I'm not sure which beans you use for that, and the Coco Loco. The Coco Loco.
They're both Coco Loco. They both use Dominican, and for the reason I mentioned that when you're making chocolate at the fun and frivolous end, which I tend to call those chocolates, rather than serious chocolate, tongue in cheek. Those more approachable caramelly notes work better. So that's what we typically use.
So I'm heading into the Peruvian one. It's different from the others in that it's 75%. Now, can you tell us why you decided to make this one in 75%, or is it?
I just felt it deserved it.
I love that answer because it deserves it.
The Peruvian beans, they're quite high in criollo, and they're slightly more delicate in flavor.
Yes.
So, what's so lovely is there are parallels with this and Solomon, because there's a real fruitiness.
Yeah.
You sort of, how do I describe that? You're getting the middle tastes are I'm getting serious, and I can taste those exotic timbers in the forests.
Yes.
The initial tastes are quite fragrant.
It's quite woody.
Some lovely floral acids in that first taste.
Please charge.
Oh, go away.
We're eating chocolate. We don't need interruption.
It's my stupid sound. It's not good. Hang on.
This is
See if I can plug in my my speaker.
This definitely deserves the 75%, and it was. You're right. For people who don't know about the criollo bean, it's otherwise known as the white bean. So when you cut the cocoa pod open, it's white inside, and it has the gentler flavor. It's less astringent. But what happens, it's very difficult to process. And this is from a farmer's perspective. It's very difficult to process because it's so delicate. If you have a lot of it, because in Samoa, it's all mixed, the purple beans, which are the Amelunau and the Criollo, and then we have the Trinitario, which is a mixture of both. It's very difficult to look after the Criollo because when you handle it a lot, like, during the fermentation process, it tends to break down. It ferments faster and it tends to break down easier, So basically, if you are needing to ferment those purple beans longer, to get rid of that acidity, it's to the detriment of the Criollo bean because it's so much more delicate and it's going to actually break up. Yeah, it'll rot faster than.
I've got so much to learn from you.
So that's what happens. So that's why if in Peru they can capture the majority of their batches of beans are Criollo, then you get an even beautiful fermentation. And this is the result. And I can taste it. It's, absolutely no acidity, very, very low acidity. And it's easy to eat, to enjoy. Yeah, but it still has all the beautiful fruity notes as well, with the little bit of woodiness that you mentioned before. I'm
trying to put my finger on what other acids. I thought I could taste orange there for a moment.
Yeah.
But I didn't often.
Maybe a little bit of cinnamon too. But my taste buds are all messed up now with all this wonderfulness.
Yeah.
But it definitely, like, again, when I taste the beans, because when I went back and just the other way for a farmer to know the fermentation is right is also just to eat the beans. And when you get used to doing that, I wasn't so great at it when I was actually roasting the beans. I always tended to shock the beans too much in the heat, and then it would kill off some of those great things that you're talking about that comes out in your chocolate bars. And I think you could write a whole book or a series on all of this because I think it's such a beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Look, everything you say about the handling of the beans, I want more. I want to know more. I want to be able to taste it like you've tasted them, and
because
when you say about tasting and process, I'm exactly the same. And like you, for a long time, I wasn't tasting them like that. Because I guess you need a certain amount of experience so that you can actually differentiate one thing from another. And so that when you first start out, you can taste, but you can't necessarily put two and two together to work out what that's going to give you. And so that you end up with just working with something that works, right?
Yeah.
You're working with a fermentation that works. I do it for so many days, it works. And I was like that for a long time with my chocolate until I started having problems. And I think I put it down to one of my roasters dying. It wasn't producing as much heat. So I went through a period of having under-roasted beans. And because I wasn't tasting everything and actually controlling it by taste, I was getting problems. And so I've gone, in the last year or two, I've gone to everything's by taste. And then you put a number beside that, you put a temperature and time profile besides the tested taste result that you want. And so absolute parallels with your tasting, your fermenting. Yes.
And, not everybody does that, and I think one of the things that I want the show to bring about in terms of conversations with people and having this conversation now is that the process of being a farmer, of growing something from scratch and then processing it taking it through that process, and then coming to you, the chocolate maker, and going through your own process. It's huge parallels of passion and attention, that we put into it, and intention. And I think that's what consumers need to know, that we're taking that much care to, if we could eat there was one time when I would think back in the farm that I would just I don't want to sell my beans or my chocolate to anyone. I just want to keep it for myself because I've done all this work, and I always say to people, as a bit of a joke, I touch every bean that that I've processed.
Wow.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with you guys who work and have such an intricate process to turn it into something else special. And I think we all have these great parallels that need to create part of the stories that consumers need to know about and need to value. And then they don't need to feel like, oh my God, I just bought a bar for like $15 or $16. Instead of having that, they could be gushing about, oh my goodness, this is, how did this guy just make this sing on my tongue, or, just this beauty that needs to be experienced by everyone. So
education is a big part of what we've got to do as an industry.
Yeah.
I mean, there are parallels, and we're lucky we can draw parallels with the New Zealand wine industry.
Yes.
And even more recently, craft beer and specialty coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are parallels there that people understand. Back in the day, they weren't a premium product and therefore not valued. And the community went through a transformation of learning to understand the difference between instant coffee and premium, coffee.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're going through that journey now. More and more people are coming over from the dark side.
I know. So in terms of is there a big difference between how Australia is kind of growing this bean to bar industry as opposed to us here in New Zealand? Is there a big difference or similarity? What's the
I don't know. I don't know how different. I've visited a number of the makers in around the Melbourne area, and from what I can tell, it's quite similar. They've got the same challenges and the same interests and the So no, I don't know any more than that.
Yeah, no, I heard a podcast recently, and I think it was the owners of Metisto in Toowoomba, Queensland. And they were sort of saying that it's still a very young industry, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, haven't we been around long enough to be, you know what I mean? It's like, should we not have cemented this by now? And I think that thing is marketing, and I think the conversation that I had with you previously, kind of touched on that a little bit in terms of what is it. How do you define bean to bar, and what is the difference? Because there are other companies who claim to be making bean to bar, but are not really. And what is the definition of bean to bar? So, can you take me through that and how you see it from your perspective? Yeah.
Okay. Well, obviously, there's the physical steps relating to it being to bar, and this is where the grey area is, because if someone says that they are buying beans and turning that into chocolate bars, well, yes, I guess if you look at it, at that. But I think the bean to bar movement really has a lot more depth to it than that, and that there's a focus on the people through the entire supply chain. So bean to bar really came about, 20 years ago or so. I think in the late 90s, even predominantly in North America, And it was by some really interesting people who wanted to bust out of the maybe the corporate world that they had worked in, and work on something that the ethics were strong and valuing people was strong, so that growers were getting fairly compensated for their beans. And there's some, we don't want to go into negative things, but there's some awful history in the food industry in our world with sugar, cacao, coffee, and a number of others, that the price has been driven down to a point that they're not viable to farm.
Yeah.
So that, I think, has got to be one of the fundamental things for a bean-to-bar maker, is that they are conscious of that, and they are taking measures to work against that, to encourage others to work against that as well, so that premium cacao is valued and distinct from commodity cacao, and so that more and more people can learn about it, so more will be grown. So that's, I think the ethics for me is the big difference between a bean-to-bar manufacturer and not.
Yeah. And I think that's a very strong point to end this conversation on. I think it's very unique that bean to bar has come into play, or has more attention around it now for us in the Pacific. I think it's something that we've now realized that is in alignment with what we're trying to do with farming in the Pacific. It's in alignment with what we want to achieve as Indigenous people and Indigenous growers in the region, and also brings together the region in terms of trading, with each other. I think we tended a lot in the past, just in New Zealand, to be bringing food from all over the world. And I think every country does that. It brings, things that we could easily source from, the Pacific. And cacao has just been one of those things. And it's a food that, I always say to myself, why is cacao not readily available in the fruit shop or the dairy or the supermarket? Why is that not happening? And really, that's one of the key reasons why I came up with the idea to do the show, was because this is somewhere where we could bring all of these people and have these conversations. And hopefully this conversation too is going to, which I feel really good about. And I'm super grateful for Raglan. I want to say thank you again for joining our show and, be so willing and so easy to work with in terms of putting on Pacific Cacao and Chocolate. We hope it's going to be a really great success for yourself as well as for us, and for all of the farmers in the Pacific that are trying to make their way out to meet us in the middle with the bean to bar movement in New Zealand. So
I think reality is, if it's successful for the farmers and the community, then it's successful for us, because we get to make these connections, and it's improving what we're doing. And by knowing that it, in some small way, it's potentially improving the life for some people in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Well, what more could we ask for? So.
Exactly. That's fantastic. Absolutely. Thank you once again, Mike. I'm so super grateful for everything, and I look forward to catching up again just in regards to everything. Thank you for the bars that I have. Thank you for the tasting, and I hope you get better. And have a great next few days. I'll be in touch. Yeah. Thanks
fantastic. A lot. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. That was a great conversation. Wow, I've taken so much away from that in terms of cacao and chocolate. Thank you for joining Cacao Conversations for Pacific Cacao and Chocolate 2022. We look forward to seeing you again.
Stop that.